Welcome welcome to the many worlds of Mike and Anthony. I'm Mike.
I'm Anthony. Hey, that intro. All right. That's my first time seeing it in real time, and I'm happy with it. That's what you get for going with the non-paid version of the Canva program. So thank you.
I've never used Canva, but good job on that. I thoroughly enjoyed what you did there.
Hey, it's coming together. That's what we do. It's coming together. We
right.
put the track. We laid the track down. We got a nice intro. It's good.
Yeah. Well, if you followed us from the beginning, at the first show I'm going to be honest, I had no idea what I was doing. And so we didn't have any, my lighting's still not where I want it, but it's better. We didn't have any, I put no thought toward lighting. I put no thought toward images. I put no thought toward layout, nothing. And so we just kind of went, with on a wing and a prayer on that first one.
We literally said, we just have to do this. So let's just do it. Let's just try it. And that's what we did on the first episode. Funny enough, that episode, we ended up going for almost 2 hours. It's probably like way too long. But for some reason, we just got carried away with one of our normal conversations. That's just what happens when Mike and I, start talking about stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. We just make it a little bit better each time. And sometimes that happens in the sports world too.
Yes, it does. Continuous improvement. That's what it's all about, right? That's what they say. Speaking of sports. Yeah. Now, I'm just taking a few liberties here. It's not going to last long, so bear with me, everyone. But yes, I have to talk about the U.S. soccer team. It has been so much fun watching this team play soccer. It's been just fantastic. So last time I chatted with everybody about it, the U.S. had their third game coming up. It was against Turkey. They ended up losing that game, but that's okay because they already knew they were getting into the round of 32 because they had played their first two games very, very well. And so they were already moving on to the next stage, which is the single elimination stage. And they ended up losing that, but it was okay. It was kind of like at the very end, and it was a nail biter, but fine. But then we played our first elimination game yesterday in the round of 32. And man, that game was nerve-wracking. It was totally fun. There was a lot of crazy things that happened in that game. There were a couple goals that we got taken away from us because we had some offsides calls. I'm not going to sit here and try to explain offsides though, because it's a little difficult to explain without, pictorial narrative here and there. But I will say they were fair. We didn't deserve the goals because we were offsides. But the awesome thing about it was we ended up finally getting a goal, which was well-deserved. And then after the second half started, about 25 minutes into the next half, we ended up having a player that got ejected. He got red carded, which was ridiculous, to be honest with you, maybe worthy of a yellow card. I don't think he was intentional about it, but they determined that he was intentional and they gave him the red card. Argue with me all you want. I don't think it was worthy of a red card. But what happens when you get a red card is you have to play a player down the rest of the game. So we had roughly another 25 minutes where we only had 9 players on the field. Well, we had 10 players on the field if you count the keeper, the goalie, against their full team. So we were down 1 player, and we still ended up getting another goal in the second half, and we ended up winning the game. It was totally awesome. It was such a fun game to watch. So go USA. We played Bosnia. That's who we ended up beating yesterday. We have our next game coming up. I believe it's on Monday. And we're playing Belgium. And I think that's going to be probably one of our most challenging games, our challenging matches. Although Belgium had a little bit of a struggle in theirs. I think they went into penalty kicks on their match. But anyways, long story short, the U.S. soccer team has been a lot of fun in this World Cup. Very, very excited. So we'll see where it goes next week when they play again. But a lot of fantastic games. Some teams that we thought were going to go through didn't make it. I mean, the Netherlands are out, Germany's out. It's been crazy. So, but as expected, France is moving forward and Spain's moving forward. So we have some really challenging teams moving ahead. But anyways, I didn't mean to steal the spotlight there, Mike, but man, I just have to talk about the U.S. soccer team. It's been so much fun.
I saw a headline at some point on some social thing where it was a big shock that Germany was out so fast.
Yeah. Well, Germany's always been a powerhouse. They've always been a powerhouse soccer team, just amazing. And yeah, they ended up losing. So there's the things have changed greatly, though. I mean, a lot of the just things have changed greatly. I won't go into detail, but because there's just too much to talk about. But players and teams, they've obviously evolved. And there's just so many great players out there, and there's so many cohesive teams out there, teams that have been playing together for so long, and then they have just some magical players up front. It's awesome. So yeah. Anyways, we'll see what happens on Monday. Even if they don't make it, it's okay. It's been a great ride, and it's still fun to watch the rest of these teams. So
Yeah. And in the world of news, we have, let's kind of recap what's going on in geek news here. So Supergirl's out. I haven't had a chance to see it yet. It has not done well at the box office, but I want to go see it because I've always liked Supergirl. I very much enjoyed the TV series Supergirl.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's a good movie. It just hasn't been doing well in the box office. But you know what? When you can stream things at home for free or for your current subscription price, there's not as much of an incentive to go see movies unless you're really invested in them.
And see, I still love the movie theater. I still love the nostalgia.
Too.
Yeah. You know, there was a time where I lived away from home, from my normal home area. And I mean, I was all alone up there. I had friends, I had colleagues, but it was just such a broad area that I lived in that I was going to movies all the time by myself. I just loved it. It was just so awesome. It was an escape for me, which they always are. Yeah. But I still love going to the movie theater, but I agree with you. It is not like it used to be. There is no waiting in line for a Star Wars movie anymore. You know, you can pick your seats now in most theaters, which I think is a great move, by the way. It's a great move.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Yeah. But it's so expensive. It used to not be expensive to go to the movies when I was a kid.
No.
But now I don't see how like a family of 5 does it.
No, I don't either.
So that's DC news and Marvel news. X-Men 97's back.
Yeah, you know, I haven't gotten back into that, but boy, I loved that cartoon when I was younger. That was another great one. But
season 2, and I haven't delved into this season yet, but I've enjoyed all of the. I consider this, you know, just another season of the original because it really is.
It really does feel like that, from what I understand. So I'll need to jump back into it. I'll do that. Maybe we'll do an episode on it or a show on it. So.
And it's just like other cartoons like Spider-Man and Batman, the animated series. The X-Men animated series from the 90s is kind of considered the bar for X-Men stuff, right?
It's a great cartoon. They made great video games off of that, by the way. I've got one for the Sega Genesis, was the X-Men, and it was based off of that year or years of animation. So it's great. And of course, you know, that was the best graphics you could get back in that time. You know, 16-bit graphics, Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, which were awesome. And speaking of Nintendo, this is one thing that was really cool. It made an announcement a couple weeks ago. There was a Nintendo Direct. I don't know if anybody ever watches any of those, but it's where Nintendo basically does a live stream for about an hour, just kind of giving an update of what's coming soon. They're always a flop according to the critics, but every once in a while they'll throw in something really cool. And they're giving the audience and the fans really what they want, which is an upgraded version of the Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time, which is by far, I think if you ask anybody that's a Zelda fan or that's played Zelda, it is the most popular, best Zelda game ever made. And I will stand by that. I love Link to the Past, which was the Super Nintendo game. That has replay value like you wouldn't believe, but there is just something amazing about Ocarina of Time for the N64. It was a great game. So we're about to get a version that is going to be Switch 2 graphics, from what I understand, and it looks amazing. And I cannot wait to have that game in my hands.
And House of the Dragon continues, and episode 2 was really rocking. I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you haven't watched House of the Dragon and you like Game of Thrones, you should like this. I'd say the biggest difference between Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon is that Game of Thrones was truly an ensemble series where you focused on lots of minor characters.
Very broad.
Yeah, whereas House of the Dragon, really, it's a story about two women who were childhood friends
Yeah.
who who both, I think, mean well, but who their people under them and the other men in their lives uh, kind of make it hard for them to
Yeah.
coexist peacefully.
Well, and it's been fun to watch that dynamic as well because that is true. You can't not like any of the two main characters. You feel for both of them,
Yeah.
especially after the at the end of this second
Mhm.
episode of season 3. I mean,
Yeah.
that was rough. I don't know. Once again, we don't need to talk about it yet if people haven't seen it yet, but it's been good so far, and I do agree with you. I actually kind of like the focus. I kind of like how it's just really it
Yeah.
because you're right. Game of Thrones was so broad. I mean, it was over here one episode, it was over there another episode. And of course, you were like you wanted to find out what happened. You were hoping the next episode was going to continue on something, and you wouldn't get that information for another 2 episodes. And it was like,
Yeah. Or if
So
you're a fan of Bran, I think we went a whole season with
I
with no
know, I know, it was ridiculous, but
who
yeah,
ironically turned out to be the main character.
which ironically, so
Yeah.
so yeah,
Okay.
that's been a fun one, but yeah, but
Yeah.
speaking of movies, Mike,
Wait,
we got to
when
dive
was
into
Well, I
yeah,
was wondering the soccer thing.
yeah.
They had a you said they had a red card. Did they have a
Yes.
blue card? Was there a choice between a
There's
red card and a blue card?
there's no blue card. There is a yellow card and a red card. But yes, I see where you're going with this, Mike.
That's very subtle.
For those who did not
You know, I mean,
understand the reference there, yes, Mike is referring to The Matrix. So this film was pretty much monumental in my upbringing as I was growing up. I remember when this came out, and I think it was about 1999, I think is when it came out. And I didn't think anything of it. We had never seen movies like this before. We were still reeling off of Star Wars, and we were getting, episode, one was coming or it was out already, and we were getting ready for episode 2. And it was all Star Wars and Fast and Furious. That I remember those were around that time too. And then the Matrix came
Terminator.
out.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
all of those. So we really hadn't. So I thought nothing of this movie really, and I think just on a whim, I was with my cousin, my younger cousin, and we just thought, hey, let's go see this movie. We're going to go see The Matrix. And of course, if anybody remembers Keanu Reeves, Keanu Reeves was not an action star from my perspective at that time. At least I can't remember. He did some offbeat films, maybe. I don't was like Johnny Mnemonic. I think that was before this, but which was kind of interesting. If it wasn't, I apologize. But he just wasn't an action star. He was Bill and Ted, Excellent Adventures. He was this, goofy, surfer dude from California. The persona. It was fun. So my cousin and we ended up going to this movie. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I absolutely could not believe what I was seeing. I will never forget. I thought this is the most incredible piece of film I've ever seen, and I believed every bit of it. I believed every bit of it. The cinematography, the CGI stuff that they did was just, it was incredible. And then just let alone the storyline.
Yeah. Yeah. He was also in one of my favorite topics. I'm a huge, huge, huge fan
Yeah.
of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the
Okay.
novel.
Yep.
And I've seen about every movie that's supposedly made a solid effort at adapting it. The only one
Yeah.
that I think really gets close is Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, which he played the main character, Jonathan Harker, or one of the main characters
Yeah.
in it.
I,
So that was kind of my first, and Bill and Ted, of course, but that was the
I
other one.
I swear by Keanu Reeves. He has been one of the, they have all these opinions about Keanu Reeves. And I'll tell you, I think he is still one of the most, like, he's the same character in but he's so versatile. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but there's just something about him as his acting skills. I think he's just awesome. So
Yeah.
this
Well, in the
movie did
latest
not
one,
disappoint.
yeah, in the latest movie, which we're mainly talking about the first one, but in the Resurrections, the latest one, which was that movie was I contend it was a parody of Hollywood, but that's a whole other story. But when I saw him for the first time in that movie, I was thinking, what's John Wick doing in the Matrix?
Right. I know. Exactly, because
Yeah.
well, we had already gotten John Wick, and we've
Yeah.
talked about that in a couple past episodes. But
Mhm.
John Wick it's still awesome. If you haven't watched any John Wick films, go watch that first one. It's hands down incredible. But to me, it was another. You want more. You want more, and that's really how the Matrix was. Although the very first film can absolutely 100% stand alone. It
Oh,
did
for
not
sure.
need. It absolutely did not need the other two episodes, which, as
Mhm.
Mike mentioned, we're not going to talk too much about those, if any, because um, it's really not necessary for this discussion. And let me start by saying this is going to be another episode that Mike and I do that is very much scientific, nerdy subject matter. It's not, if you want more theory of the movie and all of the cinematography stuff or like mythology storyline, if you want all of that, there's countless stuff on YouTube for that. Mike and I are not going to go down that road that we're aware of because we're not watching
No,
any of this stuff.
it's not a breakdown.
No, prior to. We're just going to just chit chat about some subjects within the movie that we believe are not believe, but at least, stimulate some thought.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And so, spoiler warning, spoiler alert for random things in the Matrix. I don't know specifically what we're going to spoil because honestly, we don't have a script. I mean, my script is like 5 bullet points with one word in each. So,
Right.
just it's a basic outline because we like to organically just have it happen, I think.
Yeah.
But I think the first scientific question that the Matrix poses, and there are probably countless ones, but we focused on 5 of them. The first one is, what is consciousness? Morpheus says, have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? Right?
Yeah.
So do we know what consciousness is?
Well, and that's the fundamental question, right? We act like we do. And how do I know we act like we do? Because we're all terrified right now of AI becoming conscious, right? I mean, that's been the latest and greatest, the opponents to AI, which I don't see it. I'll be honest with you. I don't see us going Terminator level. I don't see us going Matrix level, which we find that out later that it's AI. But spoiler alert. But I just don't see it. I literally look at AI right now as a job aid. It's a very quick search engine that kind of responds back to you. It's a search engine that responds back to you in I guess almost as if you are talking with someone, but you're not. Yeah, and it. It doesn't feel like you are. You can make it that way if you really want, but I still don't get it.
And full disclosure, I will say from my standpoint, from my part of it. So number one, I hate it. If I go to a YouTube channel and I don't see the people anywhere on their channel, the actual people who made it, and if I start playing it and it sounds like and I think I've gotten pretty good at recognizing AI voice. I don't want to watch a channel that no human had a part in creating. So, but I will, full disclosure, like I use generative AI to help me build my original images, but I put in extremely detailed prompts. I said, I want it to say these things. I want it to have a picture of this. And so, yeah, I do use it for that. But all of our content here is created by human beings. We tell it what we want it to do. We don't have it generate stuff for us to talk about. And so I just wanted to fully disclose that, but none of what we talk about is generated by it. Well, and I don't, to your point, and we'll talk about this more later, I think we are taking a big leap when we assume that just because something gives us information, it's sentient.
Right. Or that it will eventually, develop a consciousness. right?
Yeah.
And so going back to Morpheus posing that question, I think we all looked at it and we thought nothing of it. We thought, okay, he's just trying to be very, philosophical with the question. I think Neo looked at him the same way. He didn't even believe him, right? He didn't
Mm-hmm.
believe what he was saying. It's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, we're conscious. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so. What are you talking about? We just didn't know, and so that's, I think, what was most intriguing about it. But then, then he really started to reveal some things to him that seemed out of place. That didn't seem like, whoa. I've always been accustomed to seeing things this way, and for some reason you're telling me it's not, and then all of a sudden I'm kind of seeing it that way. That's really what started to just kind of reel me into the movie, or draw me into the movie.
But do we know what consciousness is? From a scientific standpoint, there are many, many, many different theories, but I've chosen 4 here.
Yeah.
And the point being that they're mutually exclusive. So the top thinkers about what is consciousness are completely at odds with each other. So that just, the lowdown is we don't know. And so there's global workspace theory, which basically is that it's a personal thing within the brain, that once information is distributed throughout the brain, consciousness occurs. Of course, to me, that doesn't really explain consciousness. That's just a fancy description. And then there's integrated information theory, IIT, which is that anytime you have information integrated, then consciousness, I'm greatly reducing these. There's much more.
Sure.
And then predictive processing, that the brain predicts reality. And there's some interesting studies that back that up, but how does that equate to consciousness? And then my favorite is OR, which was Roger Penrose, a very, very famous physicist who studied black holes, came up, and it's funny how much black hole physics impacts upon consciousness, which we'll come back around to later, but which is the idea that in our neurons, in our brain cells, we have these little tubes, and basically atoms fly down these tubes like sodium atoms. And I'm condensing a 3-hour lecture I used to give in university to about 5 seconds. But atoms, like sodium atoms, fly down these tubes. And when they do, they're subject to what's called quantum tunneling, where the atoms and subatomic particles literally will appear on either side of the tube as they go down it, and not be in one specific place, non-locality, and that generates consciousness. So what that would assume then is that consciousness emerges from the quantum state of the universe, which means basically it could be a fundamental fact or law of the universe.
Yeah, which blows me away, because did they ever look into this to discover what the actual particles were? I mean, I know you mentioned sodium, right? Sodium and potassium. I think of those when it comes to neurons and action potentials, but there's calcium ions as well when it comes to our muscles. So, I mean,
and neurons too. Yeah.
Yeah. And have we discovered those in these potential?
Yeah, so anything that is in a bigger sense, everything is subject to quantum physics,
right.
But that's a whole other story because we have observers. But once you get down to that level, it can be sodium. It can be anything that small that's traveling down the tube.
Oh, that's interesting. Very cool. Still way over my head, but it's cool.
Well, it's way over mine too, because we don't know. Nobody knows.
That's right. But for the sake of the movie, Morpheus knew. Morpheus
knew at least that what you believe is reality is not.
Right.
And so I'm going to take a point of privilege here, since nobody knows, and all of the great thinkers believes or have theories about something different. I have my own, called the anthropic consciousness theory, and it explains consciousness. I don't know if it explains it, but it posits that consciousness can emerge all the way from a microbial scale, from like a bacterial microfilm, where they literally connect to each other via proteins and and exchange chemical information, all the way up to stars in galaxies that can communicate through the exchange of radiation. So, from humans have always had this anthropomorphic thing, this anthropic thing we do. Anthro means man, and I'm being inclusive of all humanity. I'm not being sexist here. And so, if you go back far enough, we thought that we were the center of the universe. Literally, we thought that the sun revolved around the earth. And then Copernicus comes along. He wasn't the first one who came up with the idea, but he wrote he was the first one to write a convincing scientific explanation for it mathematically, and said, no, the earth actually revolves around the sun. And the Pope was like, I've got to ban your books. And he didn't burn him because he kind of liked Copernicus, I think. But so there were other people burned, but it was mainly because they were jerks, more so. And the fact that they were heretics scientifically, this was a good reason to burn a jerk. And so, but you go from that to humans thinking, okay, so we're not the center of our solar system, but we're the center of all life on Earth, all biology. Exactly. And then, biologists come along and say, no, you're not even the center. You're well adapted for what you do, but so are all these other species, and you're just one type of life. We were humbled in that we're not the center of life on Earth. Yeah. And I think now we're like, yeah, okay, but we're the smartest. We have consciousness, and nobody else does. And then we find out, well, whales and dolphins and recognize themselves in a mirror, and so my anthropic principle here is that I tend to, and I have to use the word believe because I can't prove it, but that consciousness may emerge from the transfer of energy. So we have our neurons that are transferring chemical energy, which is what they do at synapses. Why can't stars exchange radiation energy? Why can't bacteria exchange chemical energy and form an emergent sentience or consciousness?
Right. And so I'll tease that one out a little bit and say, if that is the case, if it's able to be proven either by human means, or if they can prove it by working at the microscopic scale, or if they can prove it through the, astronomical scale, the large, the solar system beyond here, is it possible that we could communicate through those? Is it possible, right? I mean, if we learn the means of communication, if there actually is communication going on, is there a way we can do that? I don't know. That would be pretty cool. Just saying.
Yeah. How do you ask a bacteria if it's conscious?
Well, that's what I'm saying. We'd have to figure out how they communicate if they do, which, I mean, I think there is a way for them to,
for sure.
Yeah. There is a way that they do that, but we haven't been able to really, tap into it yet. Cause I'd love to tell a biofilm to stop building up on my bathtub.
Exactly. Yeah. There are interesting studies about forests now where trees communicate through their root system through fungi.
It's the Avatar sort of.
And can allocate resources to different parts of the forest.
That's Planet Pandora, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we should do a science of Pandora at some point.
We can do that.
Okay. So moving on to the next topic here is basically perception is reality. So here we have, the reality that Neo is strapped to all these cables, and that there's a computer program basically dictating his dreams, programming his dreams and the dreams of everyone to coordinate them to living in the fifth or I think the sixth iteration, where the machines have built this world. The AI has built this world, and they're using humans as batteries. And they're programming them to all have a dream of the same reality.
Which, this is kind of one thing that I've always questioned a little bit when it came to this. So you're right. the actual reality that Morpheus was talking about, or that he knew about, was you're actually in a simulation. It has been, even though they teased it out over time, we finally find out basically around in this scene that he was plugged in to this system, but they're laying in these cocoon type things in this jelly type solution. I assume it's like an electrolyte solution or whatnot, feeding them. And they're being used for the energy that they produce. But see, my question that I've always had was, how are they actually producing energy? I guess whenever we're in a dormant state, or let's say our subconscious state, a sleeping state, we are obviously generating some form of energy. But is it that much energy then when we're up walking and talking and communicating right now in a conscious state?
Right. Yep.
So it's like, how were they stimulating them? And that's what was kind of fascinating to me, was, were they doing it through the computer program? So they were keeping their minds busy, and their minds are so powerful. I mean, our brains are very powerful that that's how they were actually keeping their body stimulated, or at least allowing them to produce the energy that this massive ocean of batteries, or human beings that were being used as batteries, to power it. Because whenever Neo does break through this, remember, he gets brought down into that room, and he's got all of those, looks like acupuncture all over him. And they're like, remain still, remain calm. All of your muscles, you've never used them before.
Although he has muscle tone. So I believe that they've been stimulating the muscles.
They have to,
so that
right?
They don't completely atrophy. I mean, but then again, he's been working out for the movie.
Right. But it was just so interesting, because it's like you've never used them before, so we have to make sure that we're stimulating them. So they were like electroding him. I don't know. It was pretty fascinating to me. But maybe that base layer of energy that a human does produce was fine, because they had millions and millions of fields of these, right? So because of that, maybe they were still able to get enough energy, compiled together. I don't know, but it's pretty interesting when we found this out. This was neat.
Yeah, I mean, same as you. I have a little trouble with this, and mainly because even back then, I think it would have been common knowledge that, because they were building houses connected to geothermal energy, which would be far more powerful. Since the humans in the movie blacked out the sun because the computer AI was using solar panels as batteries. And so they're like, well, we'll cut off your power source. But then they started using humans. Well, I think if you're a logical computer system, you tap into geothermal first, because that you don't have to worry about behavior at that point of humans.
But isn't that what the humans did, right? We went underground. How were they getting their energy? I think they had to have been using the geothermal, right? What were they using as energy? I don't even remember.
They had to be, yeah, I think.
So maybe they were the ones that channeled it. Maybe they wouldn't allow them access to it, because they kept fighting them. Because you remember the Sentinels were they called Sentinels? I think they were called Sentinels. They were always trying to bombard. Yeah.
Yep.
They were always
trying to, and they hadn't drilled that far down. Although you don't have to drill that far down to tap into geothermal, because houses don't have to drill down to the core of the earth.
That is pretty true.
But yeah, they were always trying to protect. That was the whole thing they were trying to defend against, was the drill from opening up their Zion hiding place, which that wasn't until the second movie that we saw that. But
so at this stage of the movie, though, we find out that that the humans are connected to a computer system, basically, as Mike mentioned, a computer program. Yeah. Go ahead. Let's dive into this, because this is probably one of the most. Ever since this happened in 1999, we use this terminology: red pill, blue pill. We even we have a white pill now and a black pill. I mean, we have all of these different pills now, and we utilize that in our language today. But this was the core of it. This is where it began.
I'd say this is the most iconic. And to my mind, this is the most iconic scene in the movie.
It is,
where Morpheus says, what he says is, you take the blue pill, the story ends. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. So does he take the red pill and discover that he is to a hellish nightmare energy battery system, or does he stay in the fantasy world
that he perceived as reality?
Yeah.
And as we know, because of the movie, spoiler alert, he takes the red pill.
He takes the red pill and he goes down the rabbit hole. And the rabbit hole, as we know, is an allusion to what?
Yeah, well, it's Alice in Wonderland, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is where this is really cool. This was kind of fun to me when I first noticed this or started to really think about this, because this is definitely a cerebral movie. You have to watch it a couple times to really try to get the gist of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd extrapolate, even further outside and say you got to watch the other two as well, because then you really need to, try to connect the dots there. But the Alice in Wonderland theme was kind of throughout the entire movie, right? I mean, the very first mention of it was when Neo was being courted, I should say, right? And they said, if you want to know, because he was basically a worker by day at a call center, I believe, and then he was a hacker as well. He was a very skilled hacker, which is how they got onto him. They thought, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. He's pretty good. He has a basic understanding of things. Maybe we can get him to our side. Essentially, we find out later that Morpheus had his eyes on him because he thought he was the one. But I digress. What happens is, in order to get Neo to, this is when he's still in his real world, what he perceived as the real world, in order to get him to come to the, to get to a place where they could try to convince him or to try to show him the truth or reveal it to him, they were leading him down paths that were very, very cool. And the first path was, you're going to be visited by a couple people, blah, 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 follow the white rabbit. So there's the first, there was the first mention of the whole Alice in Wonderland piece. And so Neo's like, what are you talking about? Follow the white rabbit, follow the white rabbit. So some people came to his door, knocked on his door, asking for a specific program that he needed or that they wanted. And he was exchanging it for money, that kind of thing. And then they asked him, he went and got it for him and gave it to him. And then they asked him, do you want to go out with us? We're going to some club. And he's like, no. And then all of a sudden this female turns to the side and he sees a white rabbit tattoo on her. And then he's like, oh, there's the white rabbit. You know what? I'm going to change my mind and I'm going to go. So that was the first piece. And then of course, Morpheus, obviously down the road in the movie, he gets to a point where he's actually discussing with Morpheus, and Morpheus gives him that choice. And he tells him about, you go down the rabbit hole, you take the red pill, you go down the rabbit, see how far the rabbit hole goes. Mm-hmm. This was so cool to me because if you think about Alice in Wonderland, right? Alice in Wonderland was Alice in her, or Alice Through the Looking Glass. I don't remember exactly what the
I think the name of it is Through the Looking Glass.
Right.
And then the movie was Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah. So she is in her reality. She's in reality, which we perceive as reality. And I think it is by all, means and purposes, that's reality. And she goes down the rabbit hole, which becomes this fantastical fantasy world, which, most people will say, oh, it's like, it was a psychedelic trip. It was this, it was that, but it was very, very, fantastical. It didn't seem real. And I don't think it was meant to be a fantasy. Flip that coin over. And that's what the Matrix is. The Matrix is Neo, what he perceives as reality, which we think is reality at the beginning of the movie. It's not reality. Reality is after he goes down the rabbit hole. That's reality. And I thought that was that was so cool.
They inverted the fairy tale there.
I love that. I thought, man, this movie is brilliant. Just for that reason alone, it was cool. Not to mention all the rest of the cool stuff.
That is I had never heard that till you brought that up. That's really cool. Yeah. So now let's think about the book ending here, because the first movie, which is our main focus, we very, very clear Alice in Wonderland symbology there, as you mentioned. But then at the end, in the very end of the movie, or at the very end of the trilogy, I should say, where we get to Revolutions and Matrix goes to Machine City and he confronts the AI, what happens is all the squiddies swarm to become a giant Wizard of Oz face. I mean, to me, it was a very, very clear Easter egg allusion to the Wizard of Oz scene of the big, wizard face that was all smoke and mirrors, and there was the wizard was actually just some dude from Kansas.
Exactly, and I love that they're film screenwriters out there, producers that actually take the time to do stuff like that, to throw those types of things into their story. It's just really, really cool to me. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
So now I
I
want
think
to go through and see who the Scarecrow is, who the Cowardly Lion. So,
right.
but
Hey,
to your point, that Wizard of Oz again, that was the fantasy in the movie. So again, it's been flipped.
yes.
What was fantasy in the Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland is the reality
Yep.
in the Matrix.
So now Neo, it takes him a few minutes to understand it, but now he's in reality after he gets unplugged from the battery and all of that stuff, and he actually meets humans. And so he's like, what in the world's going on? What is going on here? How did this happen? Blah, blah, blah. And really, that's where he learns that and Morpheus shows him basically what the Matrix is. He tells him what the Matrix is. And it was something that was created by AI, by the robots that they became sentient, right? And they had a big war against the humans, and the humans did what they did best, They used nukes or whatever to scorch the sky, and then they had to go underground. And we became this whole dystopian. It's like it was a dystopian movie before dystopian movies were that popular yet. Before Divergent, before what is the Mockingjay one, whatever that was, Hunger Games. Before any of those types of movies.
We got to give credit to Mad Max because they.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Waterworld. Waterworld is pretty cool too, by the way. I like that movie. That's people are up and down about that. But anyways,
so we get to the character of Cypher, and he's the opposite of Neo, which was like, I wish I had never taken the red pill. I really liked my life back in the fantasy world. And is it a fantasy world? To our point, what's reality? What's fantasy? Because perception is reality. In fact, we know, and this is as high grade science as you can actually get.
This is
so.
Cool.
Perception is reality. We never directly experience anything in our external world because all we can do is measure changes in energy. So we measure changes of energy through physical receptors that can measure changes in mechanical energy and changes in, which is like air molecules moving to create sound, pressure differences. We can measure light changes, which is radiation energy. We can measure all these changes in energy. And then what happens is those receptors send that to our brain. And we have very specific regions of the brain that create the visual approximation or the auditory approximation or the smell approximation of what is out there, but we never directly experience it. And so, when this is, there are all sorts of experiments have been done. You can go in and trigger literally specific regions of the brain and create perceptions. Or let's just take a great experiment that was done where that's been validated. In other words, other people have done it. You take a person and you have them, they have one hand on the table, and then they have they have both hands on the table, but then they put a rubber hand that looks like their hand on the table as well. And then they just show them the one of their real hands, like their left hand, and then they show them the rubber hand. And they start stroking both hands with something like cotton swab or whatever. And after a period of time, the brain, the person in the experiment will transfer believing that the rubber hand is their real hand and start to feel the stroking in the right hand, even though it's not being stroked.
It's amazing.
Or think about phantom pain or phantom limb sensation where you feel like you still have a leg after it's been cut off.
Yep.
Perception is reality. So was Cypher correct? Was he just as right as Neo?
Right.
And even though he didn't have to murder a bunch of people to be right, but
It's
You know,
it's a great question. They had to have an antagonist, a mole, basically inside, which sucked, but it was necessary. I guess it was necessary to drive the narrative forward. So,
yeah.
unfortunately, but it was a good move. I mean, so
So right now we know that in two ways so far, we do kind of live in a matrix. We live the physical world we think we experience is not really there in the way we think it's there.
yep,
And everything we perceive is a recreation from the brain. So
yep,
there's literally no way that I can think of where we can know that we're not in the matrix.
yep, which is funny.
Um, and so, okay, let's go to the next. One of my
Yeah,
favorite scenes in the movie.
yeah.
There is no
I love
spoon.
this. I love this too. There is no spoon. And just real quick saying this, because this is the point of the film where Neo he's already come to terms with accepting that, okay, he wasn't in the real world. He is now. And now he's understanding, or he's trying to learn, uh, all of the things that Morpheus and their team has learned about the Matrix over the countless years, decades, whatever, or maybe the iterations of the different programs. They're trying to teach him that because they believe that Morpheus will be able to basically hack the code and end this once and for all, because they were trying to defeat the AI, but they were trying to do it from within. And they felt like the only way to do that was to go in through the matrix to do that. So that's kind of the premise of the film as it plays out, just on the surface, the superficial. That's how it plays out. So they have to take him into the matrix several times to teach him these things. One of the first times that he's in the matrix, he has to go see what they call the Oracle. We'll get to that in just a minute. But one of the things that he first really learns is not all the stuff that Morpheus was telling him about reality and the Matrix and all that stuff. He's started to actually learn, this information within the Matrix on how the program works and how there are ways of getting around the program. Why? Because at the end of the day, it is a program. It is ones
Yeah.
and zeros, right?
And
Or
if you can learn,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead, Mike.
no, go ahead.
And in this case, it's not ones and zeros that we're talking about. And I'll let you explain this piece, because this is awesome, that there is no spoon.
Yeah, they're literally. And so when we go into looking at the nature of reality, this is also a established scientific fact that matter is almost all empty space. And so I said we know two things. One is that our brain creates our experienced reality, but the other one is that the things we think that are solid aren't really there. Matter is almost all empty space. In fact, this is an actual statistic: 99.999999999% of an atom, which all matter that we are aware of, because we don't know what dark matter is, but all matter that we're aware of is made up of atoms. Okay, and so the actual physical part of the atom is about the size of a marble compared to the empty space of the football field that the electrons orbit in. So tiny, tiny, tiny things are orbiting this space. 99%, way past 99%, is just empty space. But why does it seem solid? Is because even though they're tiny, they exhibit electromagnetic forces, which basically, it creates a force field.
Yes.
So our force fields so do our atoms. So when those force fields meet, they can't move past one another. So you have never touched anything. You get really close, but your force field touches the force field of the thing that's almost entirely empty space, with tiny, tiny, tiny particles generating that empty space. That is established science.
So with that said, now that you know that everything is just atoms and electrons, just tightly packed, condensed, but producing their own force fields. So they're basically, it's a repulsive theory, or it's a repulsion,
Yes.
right? Repulsive force, sorry. And so, when you're trying to touch your hand, are you really touching your hand? Or is that the atoms at the tip of your finger are being repulsed by the atoms that are in the palm of my hand? Even though, I'm detecting, I'm touching something, but are you really? You're not. That's what's so bizarre about this. So to answer the question, or to at least address the question or the issue, there is no spoon. There really isn't. And it took Neo a minute or two to understand what the kid was trying to teach him about that it's not that I can't remember how the kid posed it, but it's like, it's not that there's this or there's that, but it's the fact that there is no spoon. And it was just really fascinating to me, because he was basically telling him that you think there's a spoon there, but if you really look, it's just a bunch of atoms and it's a bunch of, subatomic particles and electrons. And therefore you can see through it or around it or manipulate it.
In the Matrix, it would have been that there's not even atoms and electrons. It's just basically light or perception. So there's the spoon isn't there in two ways. The spoon isn't there as part of the computer program simulation. It's also, if Neo, once he wakes up and he's interacting with the people on the Nebuchadnezzar, and he's eating, notice there's a scene where he's eating not soon after that with a spoon.
Right.
And so there's also no spoon there when he's eating with Mouse, and Mouse is like, "Yeah, live for the day, man." And so
tasty wheat.
Yeah. And so there is no, we perceive something that we hope is somewhat meaningful in terms of our being able to navigate and survive in an external world. But I will tell you that people with schizophrenia are absolutely convinced that I met a man once with schizophrenia who believed that the trees were all people following him around wherever he went. And he believed that as real as you or I believe in the spoon that we're eating our Wheaties with.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
So let's move on to another one of my favorite scenes. I think I've just organized this by my favorite scenes. But
that's what you call Mike's favorite Matrix scenes.
Yeah.
Yes, the deja vu kitty. Who doesn't experience deja vu? I think everybody has. And if you haven't, just wait. You will at some point in time. And it's the most bizarre phenomenon, I think, that we have as humans, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are scientific things I've heard to explain it. One of them that it's basically a glitch in the brain where we process something that we're seeing right now, but then our brain sort of reprocesses it again an instant later. But we perceived the first time we processed it as a memory, and our brain can't tell the difference between an old memory and a new memory. But and so it's basically instant replay, but we misinterpret it. Although that's not proven that that's what's going on. And this leads us into, I think, the most pertinent scientific theory relating to the Matrix, which is simulation theory, which is, this came from information technology scientists, information theorists, which is, and we're going to build on something we talked about when we were talking about the idea of many worlds and being out there that have developed potential life, that has developed intelligence, that has developed space travel, blah, blah, blah. So when we were talking about we were talking about the science of another TV show that we like very much. And so if, as the numbers would suggest, that there's an infinite universe and that there should be billions of sentient races capable of building computers, then some of those statistically would be able to create artificial intelligent simulations and create basically a simulated world, like our attempts with things like Sim, and that kind of thing. The Sims, I mean. And so they posit, information theorists posit that there's a 20% chance, 1 in 5% chance that we all exist in an actual matrix, a computer simulation created by someone. In this case, it would differ from the matrix in that it would not be artificial intelligence creating that. But I would also say that if you can create artificial intelligence, then some of that percent would probably be created by artificial intelligence as well.
Could very well be.
So that's the scientific theory. And this one is not one that I would say is established fact, but it's a good theory.
Yeah. And really it does kind of follow the premise of the movie, right? I mean, the whole idea is you were living in a simulation, a simulated universe, except it wasn't really a universe. It was just a computer program that was generated by AI, so they could use the machines. They call them the machines, so they could use the human body to power their existence, to keep them, I guess, alive or conscious, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, and I think
very bizarre.
We were talking before. Why did the machines need the humans other than for batteries, or why did they need to create the Matrix? I think it's because they created the first Matrix, which was a paradise, and they created a hell version and different versions after that, which I think we've got built in some Catholic kind of planes of existence, mythology, dogma built into that. But so I think the problem was paradise didn't work because humans have no purpose or meaning, and that's the idea, and that they were dying. So people were dying and their batteries were dying, literally. And when you create a hell, then that also causes the batteries to die. So they had to create a version where they have hope. And so hope comes about because they allow basically a small resistance force to exist. They allow a prophet called the Oracle to give them hope that they can break free of, if they don't like it, there's hope that they can leave it. But in the sixth iteration, I think, which is where the first movie is, Neo, the idea is they don't want any more people to escape it. Whereas I think in the next iteration, after he has a truce with the machines, the deal is if that a human wants to escape, they're allowed to.
Which is just really bizarre. Or they can stay plugged in and there's no harm, no foul, essentially living harmoniously with the AI, with the sentient programs. But then there's the rogue program, right? In the Matrix. So you can't just think, human beings all have their own different personalities. We have we have good and we have bad, right? At least that's how we perceive things. It's either good or it's bad. What makes us think that AI can't do that either, right? Why can't we have a benevolent AI, and why can't we have the alternate of that? And we absolutely, I think we see that play out in the Matrix eventually. The majority of the time it's all bad. They don't get along with the humans, so they just want to use the humans. They want to keep them in their place, and the humans that are fighting back, they have to destroy them so they can just, everything will be just happily ever after. But it sounds like eventually, towards the end of the series and whatnot, that that they do kind of come to an agreement or a truce. They realize they can never escape it. So the purpose, and I think this is threaded throughout the entire film. It's balance. It's all about balance. And Neo's the yin, the sentient is the yang. It's AI and human finding a balance.
Well, and that was, it's all about, beings always want more power. It's about who's controlling who with that power. And as we saw with the councilman guy, when he goes down, takes Neo down, and he says he likes to hang out in the lower depths where the machines are keeping them alive, because it reminds him that they still need machines. and the machines
Yeah.
still need the humans. And
Yep.
I think what's really profound is that by the end of the third movie, the machines and Neo, when they have the truths, they essentially came up, they're essentially offering humanity the exact same choice Morpheus offered Neo, which is
Yeah.
you can take the red pill or the blue pill.
Yep.
How now we never know
Full circle.
whether the machines make that choice available to people who didn't know they had a choice. And so that would have been a fourth film, I think, that didn't get made. But
another thread to tease
yeah.
out.
So
well,
okay,
they did make a fourth. They did make a fourth. It's a fifth one, right? That we're waiting for, right?
well, when they made a fourth, but when I say a fourth one we didn't get, was I'd like to have seen a movie about how much choice they offered them.
I got you. I see
The fourth movie, my take on it is that it was a parody of Hollywood in reboots.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty strongly stated throughout the movie, because it basically just retells the story of Hollywood trying to pressure the Wachowskis into making another.
How sweet is that?
How sweet and is so, but I want to say that I also think that, and I haven't seen this anywhere else, maybe it's out there, but I think another reason in my head canon why the machines needed to keep humans around was because, but we only know this now because of our experience with current AI, that AI cannot be creative, which is one of its huge downfalls. It can only give us options based on what humans have already created. So I think at some point, if the Matrix actually existed and the machines, they would need humans kept around just to be able to dream up creative solutions to help them adapt to the changing environment, because machines will still have to adapt to the changing environment.
Which is so weird to even go down that path.
Yeah. And then the last kind of thing I want to talk about from a scientific point is the holographic universe theory. And there's a book came out. This is from scientist Leonard Susskind. And this also comes from black hole theory, which is when matter collapses into a black hole, it collapses into such a finite space that it creates a boundary area that is two-dimensional. And holographic universe theory is a book. You have to basically read the book. And I went into it super skeptical because as a scientist, I'm pretty skeptical about most things. But at the end of the book, I was like, wow, this guy makes a pretty convincing case that we live in a hologram where information is encoded into a two-dimensional boundary surface of a black hole, and that appears as a hologram in 3D. So the information is there in the matrix code, but it can appear as a hologram. This is still 2D, but Neo is seeing it in 3D, right? Because of the depth.
So this is one of the most, I don't know how to explain how amazing this was when this happened in the movie. Okay. So Neo, he basically is at the point where he's reaching his final stage, his final level, right? To use a video game reference. He's been leveling up, right? And he gets to a point where he learned how to dodge bullets and all of this stuff. But it comes to a point where he realizes that, and you go back to the there is no spoon theory or there is no spoon lesson. He realizes he doesn't even have to dodge bullets. The bullets aren't even there. Or, if they're not, if they are there, they are essentially a sequence of, as you can see, code. And that code in this case, as long as he can see it, can rewrite the code and stop them or, whatever. So, and we see that, and it's absolutely amazing when this happens, because it's like the goosebumps just start to just take over, because Link is sitting there. Link is sitting there on the other side in the Nebuchadnezzar, and they're watching Neo trying to help him get out, because that's what happens when the agents come. The agents are hard to beat because they're a computer program within the Matrix, and they're strong, they're powerful, they're a program, they're everything is perfect on them, they're fixed for the most part. We find out later that there's glitches, but essentially they're perfect. So Neo essentially assumes, from the human perspective, and this is just my interpretation of it, he basically assumes their power. That's exactly how this happens. I mean, he literally absorbs Agent Smith, right? I mean, Agent Smith runs at him, and Neo just stands there and absorbs him because because he's actually seeing everything the way it actually is in the Matrix, which is everything's code. And as you mentioned, Mike, it's all in a 2D, because code it's 2D. There's no 3D to this. It's just code. But when you look at it holistically and you interpret the code is basically coding 3D patterns in his mind. And so that's how he's able to manipulate the bullet. Matter of fact, they shoot all these bullets at Neo, and Neo just stands there, and the bullets just come to him and then just stop. And then he looks over and he just grabs one and he takes it and he looks at it, and then they all just, fall. And then all of a sudden, Neo and Agent Smith start running at each other, or if I'm not mistaken, Agent Smith starts running at Neo, and Neo's like, he doesn't have to dodge him anymore. He doesn't have to punch him. He doesn't have to fight him anymore. He just stands there, and then he just, he just absorbs him because it's all code in the Matrix. And anyways, it's just, of course, later on in the other movies, you realize, oh, there was a part of him that was, they were kind of a yin and a yang. They were, joined together. That, I won't go into that because I'm a little fuzzy on that aspect of it. This was really cool though when it happened. I mean, Link basically is like what's happening to him? Why is he just standing there? It's like he's seeing in code, and they're like, dude, like, and then Morpheus is like, it's because he's the one, and that was like, man, your skin just like, oh, it was awesome. It was so cool, and that's essentially how the movie ended. That's how he beat. That's how he beat them. And then
we have the famous Superman scene where he flies.
Yeah, basically Neo comes back and is like, and he kind of gives this little talk scene, like essentially, there's the lesson. I don't remember how he states it. It was really, really neat though, how he posed it to basically, he was talking to the people watching, and he was, and then he basically showed them that he understands and knows how to manipulate and control and work in the Matrix. He basically has full reign in the Matrix, whatever need be he can do. And that's how he could fly and all of that stuff in the, what everybody else sees is the real world. So,
so the only way, I mean, one way, I guess we could discover if we were actually in a Matrix like that is if we could discover the cheat codes, right? Because that's basically, do you remember playing those like first person shooter games in the 90s? And you discover a cheat code and you can like go through the wall and stuff.
Dude, the debug modes, and then of course, extra lives. Yeah, man, Contra, dude. That's like the classic. Contra and Life Force, both made by Konami, I believe. Yeah. Awesome. But no. It was really great. Great movie.
I've got a question for you here to kind of start wrapping up. So you mentioned he's able to stop the bullets.
Yeah.
Look at them. There's that great scene where they kind of all fall down to the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that brings us to not at all a scientific question, but we have bullet time.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to pose this question to you, Anthony.
Okay.
Is bullet time where they go into the building to rescue Morpheus, which is basically the climax of the first movie.
Yeah.
Is it a great action scene or the greatest action scene of all time?
Of course you would ask me a question like that in front of all the audience members watching. Look, I mean, there are tons of action scenes in tons of movies that are fantastic, right? I really, I don't know. I can't argue with this as it's not being the best action sequence I've ever seen. Yeah. And I'll tell you why. I guess this kind of reminds me of, so back in I'd say in the 90s, car stereos were really popular, where putting a subwoofer in the back of your car, a couple subs, that was really popular. And then as I got a little bit older, I had my car stereo. It was already great. Didn't need to do anything else. one of my friends' dad basically built a home theater, and home theater, home hi-fi has always been something cool, but we were really getting into some sweet technology. We were getting into 5.1 surround and all of that good stuff. And if you know that, like, you go to a movie theater and you were listening to surround sound, you could bring that into your home, basically, is what that technology was allowing.
Right.
That was expensive, but I was like, we got to do this, Dad. So my dad and I, we basically put together a project to build a surround sound theater in our home. And so of course we did. And this was absolutely one of the coolest movies that I anticipated getting, and I used it moving forward once we did get it, to test the surround sound system, because it's so much fun to just sit and play this. So you ask if that's the best action scene. I can't argue with that, because that was my most favorite scene to test the surround sound of our home theater. And I mean, I would crank that thing up. And I'll just say this: if you had a really awesome, we were just dealing with 5.1 surround. Now they've got 7.2 or 7.1, 9.2. I mean, you can get into 11, I think, speakers now and all that stuff. It's wild. But hearing that, watching that scene in surround sound was second to none. The moment Neo goes in so they go into the Matrix, and Neo, so Link is sitting there with the program, right? And Link says, "What do you need?" or whatever. And then Neo's like, "Guns, lots of guns." And then all of a sudden they're in this, this white screen. And then all of a sudden, whoo, this whirring of just racks of guns, and your surround sound system, you almost felt the wind blowing in your face. That's how the goosebumps made you feel, like, so just listening to that. And that was just what started the scene, let alone when they get into the elevator room, right? And then the bad guys show up, and they just unload on this massive, I don't know how long it was. It felt like it was 30 minutes of just a gun firing scene. Everything was just slow motion here and there. They were doing all these stunts and acrobatics, and you could hear, and the surround sound just intensified it, because you could hear the bullets just whizzing by your ears, and then crack, smash here, and a crack there, and explosion here, and just bullets and the guns just choop, 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 choop. It was just,
and the
awesome.
plaster and everything raining down like the Matrix.
Everything. Yeah. So that's why I can't argue with this being one of the best action scenes, but you have to, here's the caveat, you have to watch it with an awesome surround sound system, because that's the only way you're going to get the full effect of this action sequence. And it is awesome. Just that scene alone, the guns coming in to and then the elevator scene. But then it goes much further. They get into Save Morpheus, and there's the big helicopter scene. It's just awesome. So yeah, I mean, I find it hard to argue that there's any other action scene better than that. They really just nailed it. If you even say they nailed it, what did they nail? I mean, there's nothing to nail. They set the bar.
Yeah. And I'm going to make a screenwriting point here, which I often like to do at the end of these things, yes. Which is that, so how many movies since then? And let me just say right off, even though I didn't think about this until just now, the first time I saw this in a home, in a home setting, not in the movie theater, was at a friend's house who had surround sound. So the first time I saw it at home was in surround sound. And the first time I saw the movie, obviously it was. But I hadn't thought about that till just now. So how many movies have you seen since then when you have an action scene where they have bullet time, where everything slows down and they're jumping in slow motion? I want to make
there's a couple, and they were really cool. I'm not gonna lie. Not that if we want to get into that, but Inception probably had another amazing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, Christopher Nolan, took it to another level. Yeah. Inception was awesome. We can talk about that later, but that was one. That's one.
Yeah, with a lot of movies, and Inception was truly him taking that and raising the bar. But I'd say a lot of movies incorporate that just for kind of a standard action effect now.
Right.
There was another movie I think it was done really well in its own beautiful way, which was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Hidden Dragon. Yeah.
Which was if you like kung fu movies, that's pretty awesome.
That is a good movie.
Yeah, but
Oscar
but
winner,
I will say that in most movies it doesn't make any actual plot sense.
Right.
But in The Matrix it does. It's actually important to the plot, and the reason is because Neo is the one, and he is beginning to start to see the Matrix. He can slow down time in the Matrix because he can start to control it. So it's not just a cool effect in the Matrix. It is important to understanding how he's controlling the Matrix.
Morpheus first showed him that in their kung fu scene, right? Remember when Morpheus did that massive? So they're doing all this kung fu, right? It's the montage. It's the training montage that we talked about on the Batman.
A lot of training montages.
That's right. And so they were in the training simulation, and Morpheus was basically schooling him. He came down to like, is that air you're really breathing? You know, because he was all winded, and Morpheus was doing all this stuff too, and he wasn't even fazed by it. So it's like, it's all about what you were perceiving. But Morpheus was doing all this awesome kung fu stuff where he would jump in the air and like 20 kicks before he landed, and then he did that one where he jumped up in the air and he just kind of froze. You know, it was awesome. It was so cool. So he's kind of showing him a little bit about that, but that was before we realized, what he was doing. He was just trying to teach him. He was trying to teach him about that the possibilities are limitless in the Matrix. You just have to understand that. You can't be afraid. You have to be confident in you understanding it. Of course, later on, Neo ends up learning how to read code, and then everything else is, it's easy. But yeah, I agree. I would say that Christopher Nolan also made it. It was important in Inception as well, if I remember, because remember the world was kind of spinning around as well, right? And they were all like floating and stuff, and that was because the whole area could be manipulated whenever because you're in your subconscious, you're in a dream state. So there was just weird things on how you could perceive that. But that's another discussion for another time. I still think we should do a show on Christopher Nolan movies outside of Batman.
Nolan retrospective,
because man, Nolan definitely he's awesome. He's got some stuff. I'm not sure about how the Odyssey's going to go. But there's a handful of movies that he's done that are just.
Yeah, well, I'm going to watch it because I got to watch it because it's Christopher Nolan.
Exactly. Hands down. And Hans Zimmer.
Anytime. Also, another reason it makes sense in a movie or TV show is anytime you have a speedster like the Flash moving so fast that everything else seems to slow down. That totally makes sense. And I'm gonna end with my thoughts with. I keep saying I have one last thing. I always have one more last thing, which is the trolley car problem. So in philosophy and almost everything you see about the Matrix is about the philosophy of the Matrix. But I want to say that in so many instances in movies and TV shows, we have the trolley car problem, which is if you had a trolley car that was going to hit, let's say, 5 innocent people, and you could kill the driver of the trolley car, would you do it? Would that justify saving the 5 innocent people? And so they have a trolley car problem here, which is if you think about all those security guards and presumably even like the FBI and all the other, those are real people who are fighting, thinking that they're doing their job. They're not bad people until the agents are the antagonists and they're the ones that deserve to die, I suppose. But but all the security guards, they're just doing their job, man, trying to protect that place. From all they can tell, there's burglars coming in to rob them blind.
Right. But the evil of the perniciousness of the programs, the Sentinel programs, right? Yeah. They would infiltrate their bodies. That's not fair.
Yeah. No. So it's trolley car problem. They have to kill. They have no choice but to kill innocent people to save a lot more innocent people.
So I love that you did this, and we can end on this too, because that always brings me back to Captain Kirk and Spock, right?
Yeah,
sacrificing the one to save the many.
Right. Right.
or however it was. I mean, that was like that was forever will live in movie history. Spock making that sound that, or making that statement, it's sacrificing the one to save
Yeah.
the many. Or, yeah. I mean, that was just, I don't know. It's brilliant.
The
It's a
good of the
brilliant
many outweighs the need of the few or the
few.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. However they said it. Yeah. The needs of the few or the needs of the many. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
Oh,
know.
we need
It's
to say
awesome.
something about Star Wars.
What's that?
We need to say something about Star Wars. I love Star Wars because we have to have Star Wars in every
That's
episode.
right. We have to mention. Well, hey, I still haven't seen the Mando yet, and I'm just gonna wait till it comes
Either.
out on streaming. Not gonna lie,
Yeah,
just gonna wait. Yeah.
I am
So
too. I am too. All right. Well, this has
sorry.
been fun, man.
Yeah. No. This was definitely a good one. I'm glad we got to talk about The Matrix. Great film. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Hopefully you have. I mean, it's been around since 1999. I still think it holds its weight, to be real honest with you.
Oh,
Even
yeah.
in the 4K version, the CGI, the graphics, awesome. But the storyline itself is incredible. So yeah, give it a watch and make sure you got at least a 5.1 surround sound system going when you watch it. And it is set up properly too. You got to have the rear surrounds and all that, because you're going to love that. You're going to love that action scene. It's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, buddy.
All right, Mike, have a great one, sir. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Okay.